Ginger and Dylan, I just need 1 minute to finish reading one public comment. So give me just a second. All right, give me about 1 more minute. I realized I was printing out the public comment and not everything printed, even though I have now read it, but I want to make sure I get it acknowledged. All right, everyone, we will call this special meeting of the West Linn-Wilsonville School Board to order. And thank you. I really appreciate your patience just as I was getting organized to chair this meeting. This is a special meeting of the West Linn-Wilsonville School Board, and I just thought I would briefly explain, how and why we got here today. A special meeting is established by policy for any meeting that is scheduled that is not on the calendar of meetings that we as a school board set in August. We are here today because I was contacted by email by Dylan Hydes informing me that he and Christy Thompson had drafted a resolution that they wanted to get before the school board before October 15th. At the time, I understand that Dylan and Christy believed that state officials would be convening on that date to discuss updating health metrics related to in-person attendance at schools. And Dylan said that he and Christy had worked on a resolution that they'd like to get before the board for their consideration prior to the October 15th date. I have since learned that the October 15th date is a little bit of, I think, a community-wide misnomer in that there aren't any decisions being made on that date, but that it was the date that would start the process for reevaluating health metrics for health metrics related to COVID-19. So that's how this matter kind of came to my attention. And just as a point of process for our board operating agreement says that it takes 2 school board members to get a meeting on, or get an item on an agenda. It doesn't allow just 2 board members to call a meeting. It's board policy BDB says that a special meeting can be called by order of the chair or at the request of 3 board members. Since Dylan and Christy represented that they felt they needed to have the board review the proposed resolution before October 15th, and our next scheduled meeting was October 26th. I served as the 3rd board member needed to call this meeting. And I'm doing it in that capacity rather than calling this meeting in my own volition as the chair. That being said, does anybody have any questions or comments about that? All right.
I do.
Oh, okay.
So I have some concerns about whether this is proper for a special meeting under our board policy BDB, and I have some additional questions about whether we met our operating agreement as well. So as I look at board policy BDB, it says the purpose of special meetings is to give the board an opportunity to gather information and to discuss and fully explore various aspects of an issue. I think the implication is that it would be regarding additional time needed for, that's how I read it. But nonetheless, even a narrow reading of that indicates that the purpose is to have information to gather. We'd have time for that and to discuss and fully explore. I note that we set this for less than an hour. And in addition, the agenda was published late on Monday. We still have public comments coming in, which are numerous. I have not been able to read them all before this meeting because they were just sent out this morning. And I would note that we have a number of different constituencies contacting us. The resolution language contains a number of factual statements that I have not had time to vet either from the CDC website, nor compare that data to our own district in terms of asking those inquiries of the superintendent. So my concern is if the purposes of the special meeting as stated in the policy are not being met, and I would object to having this special meeting in terms of reaching a vote today on the resolution. In addition, if you give me just a minute, I will go back to the board operating agreement, which I believe provides that we would not have surprises for the superintendent is the way we often
and on the issue of surprise, I do believe, I mean, I can address that in particular, in that I do believe any surprise has been eliminated in that I, as chair, did not agree to set the meeting unless and until Christy and Dylan had the opportunity to share their proposed resolution with the superintendent and get feedback.
My understanding is that the resolution wasn't drafted with the input of district staff, and that again increases my concern about having time to look at the data. And
so I think when we get to the details, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I think you're raising some valid points, but they go towards the actual resolution. And so if I hear you, it's two-pronged. One, you're calling into question whether or not this is the appropriate use of a special meeting. Then if we say yes, then I think we open up discussion about, introduction of the resolution and have that discussion, to which that would be when you would voice those points.
I don't think that the special meeting on this topic is proper. We've already taken votes recently on the issue of our plan and provided it to the Department of Education. That plan addresses the metrics of reopening in detail. And this is asking the board to take a second look at that. It's not proper for a special meeting.
Procedurally, I don't know if anybody else wants to chime in. I think procedurally we have done what we need to do to appropriately call a special meeting. In my understanding of the language, I'm not seeing this subject matter as being outside the purview of something on which you would call a special meeting.
Can I weigh in on this, Reagan?
Yes.
I think that the code BDB gives wide latitude for what a special board meeting can be for. And I would certainly think this would fall within that, especially in the circumstances we have right now. I think it's important that we not put form over substance. And this is a situation where timeliness is critical. And we can navel gaze on this for months or years, but I do think the board needs to act. And we'll probably never have enough time to do that. And so at some point, we do need to consider this and take an action. And I point out, we're not directing, this resolution would not direct staff to do anything. These are merely recitals of principles and requests of the governor. So that's why I'm comfortable moving forward today with the resolution.
And the fact is that it is not meet the purpose that's provided in the special meeting, and that there is no urgency. We've recently voted on the metrics and the school's plan, and simply having a resolution that asks us to revisit that is not meet the purpose or the urgency of the special meeting requirement of a board policy.
We voted on the governor's metrics to return to school. I don't recall that.
Maybe Dr. Ledwig can talk about the last meeting and our vote on the information that was provided by Dr. Spencer Iams.
And I would just like to, one more comment about the difference between a special meeting and what's called an emergency meeting. I would absolutely agree that this would not be within the purview probably of an emergency meeting, but the special meeting designation is much more broad and allows us to come together at any time that by order of the chair or by the request of 3 board members, of which we have, and as long as it's properly noticed, and that we've done. Dr. Ledwig, do you want to address process as to what we as a board around health metrics or a district have done to date?
I would just say that in terms of my understanding of special meeting, when we have inquired of OSBA to call for one as staff, we received information that a special meeting broadly is any meeting that has not already been approved on the board calendar. So when you approve the board calendar and you have your set meetings, your regular work sessions, your regular meetings and your work sessions, if you call another meeting that is not within there, it begins to fall into the category of a special meeting. The distinction of special and emergency likely is about the content. So that's all I would say about that. When we've asked for a special meeting, we've been told that by OSBA that special just means one that's not on your calendar and that you need to still abide by the proper amount of time that the public is noticed, which we have, and that public comment has been permitted, which we have. So therein, I believe we're within that broad definition. In terms of the operational blueprint, which is what I believe Director Fitch is referring to. Remember, there was a 2-part because we were beginning to move towards hybrid, and then the health metrics came out and we shifted to CDL. There were 8 components of the operational blueprint. The first 3, they actually became 4 because it was sections 0 through 3. did have to also get approved by the board and submitted, not voted on, but presented to the board and submitted to Clackamas County Public Health, of which they reviewed them, approved them, and given us their letter of approval. And then our operational blueprint sections 4 through 8, and everything is on the website, did also get submitted to the state by the date that was required so that we could begin with CDL. So that's, I think, I'm not sure what else I'm asked about that, but that was working within the Ready School Safe Learners guidance. And in that guidance document, the health metrics are referenced. The 30 per 100,000 for a K-3 exception, the 10 per 100,000 for grades 4 through 12. The county test positivity rate, the state test positivity rate. There are additional exceptions in that guidance for very small school districts. There is also an exception for what's called limited in-person instruction, which we've described to the board. So the health metrics are referenced both on OHA's website, Clackamas County Public Health website, and also in that document provided by ODE and OHA.
All right.
So our operational blueprint worked with those metrics, if that's what we're trying to allude to.
All right. So I, as chair, do feel comfortable moving forward. Ginger will note your reservations for the record. I did, before going into this meeting or even knowing that you had reservations, I had looked into this matter just to ensure that we had proper process and procedure and had intended to open with that kind of statement of how we got here before even knowing you had concerns. So I do feel like I did look into this matter in advance, and I feel comfortable proceeding in that this is an appropriate format for this particular matter before the board. With that being said, we will now move on to, unless if anybody else has an objection to and they want to put it on the record, raise your hand and we can note that. Okay, thank you. All right, we will move on to, it's the time for our public comment and input. We did receive a lot of input, and part of our process is with having these Zoom meetings. We are allowed to do that publicly, but we are allowed to accept public comment by email. One of the things that we do have to make sure we do is that all board members have had the opportunity to review that. So if you have not had the opportunity to review the public comment, then we would take a few minutes to do that now. So Ginger, you did reference not having the ability to do that. So we're going to go ahead and just pause and allow you the opportunity to do that. There was a significant amount and it did come in early this morning. So let's pause and make sure that we get the opportunity to hear all that in writing, and then we'll resume.
Do you have a time, Chair Molitor, that if people want to read, it's 11:35 from what I can tell. Do you want to reconvene at 11:40?
Ginger, in particular, do you want to just give an estimate of what? I know that there's a lot. All right, let's start with 10 minutes. I just don't, okay. So let's come back at 11:45. We'll check in. All right, thank you.
Yeah, I'm just piping in a little bit here. I'm prepared to move forward, and also just noticing in the number of public comments, the sentiment being expressed about how quickly the turnaround is on the the public notice and the opportunity to weigh in. So again, I'm perfectly comfortable and prepared to move forward, and noticing the combination of the October 15th date not being one that had the urgency that once perhaps was believed, and then the sentiment expressed by public about the quick turnaround. So.
Move forward.
I'm sorry, did you say something, Ginger?
I can move forward as well.
Okay, thank you. So on public comment portion of it, it was more voluminous than what we are typically accustomed to. And typically I summarize content, but this time we have 80 public comments. So knowing that all board members have had the opportunity to read and review the comment, and the comment is directed towards us, I am not going to take the time today to summarize all 80 of them. I will say that we received, and yes, it was short turnaround on these types of meetings, which happens. We often don't get any public comment. So the fact that we have 80 demonstrates that this did reach our public. We received roughly 17 that were in support of the resolution or some interpretation of the resolution, as well as then we had 63 individuals who were discouraging adoption of the resolution. I'm going to read the names of individuals who we received the comment from into the record, just so we have knowledge of receipt. And it also helps in the event that we overlooked something, then an individual can call it to our attention. So I have Alana Molden. I'm going to start with those who were in favor. I have Alana Molden and the Molden family, Lisa Simhauser, Joanne Masters, JC Talvis, Barbara Haas, Julie Stern, Dominic Rivera, Amaya Bilabo Cromwell, Rachel Ligocki, Jenny Peters, Brianna Gilmore, Rhonda Gomes, Lisa Quigalio, Jennifer DeBerg, Leanne Mason, Michelle Winder, Jenny Kling, Kristen Liston, Kim Gwynn. Okay. And those were to the positive, and essentially a lot of them pointed out the toll on kids, both socially and educationally, as well as then on families economically. Dr. Ludwig.
There was one that did not get into the packet of those. It's from the Priest Mouse family. They did email all of you prior to this morning, but they are also affirming the resolution.
All right, thank you, thank you. And then for those who were not in favor, we have Jennifer Saracen, David Munoz, Danica Zundel, Catherine Dennis, Jackie Bannett, Rebecca O'Brien, Nancy Kay, Amy Gilkey, Katie Flaker. I have Miss Mensa down, and for whatever reason, I'm sorry, I didn't catch the first name. Tian Jin, Allison Colta, Troy Matthews, Sean Foster, Andrea and Jeremy Doble, Alexis Harmon, Catherine Miller, Anitra McCormick, Alyssa Blackhurst, Nina Bauer, Sarah Enriquez, Amy Estimada, Karen Detjens. I'm sorry about pronunciation of names as well. Kelly Stanfield, Dana Vanderzanen, Cheryl DeLay, Wind Lothamer, Dylan Robertson, Rochelle Gutierrez, Teobel, Heidi Lentz, Christine Frizieres, Taylor Egan, Julie Frazier, Meg Grote, Jason Stillinger, Allison Farrell, Mashana Miller, Autumn Paul, Magdalena Valusek, Eric Schroeder, Nicole Pierce, Amanda Corey, Aaron Kays, Laura West, Monica Emmerich, Kate Corson, Stephanie Pacheco, Tracy Peterson, Leslie Hochul, Sarah Hafner, Roslyn Pasica, Brittany Armstrong, Mindy Black, Brittany Drake, Jesse Skinner, Joey Handley, Mackenzie Weeks, Heather Carney, and Brainy, sorry, Alexandra Stout, Stacy Lewis, Christine Wiley, Andy West, Tara Hiramatsu, Gabel Velasquez, and that is it. All right. So with regards to that, I did want to, while we did receive, a lot of public comment in advance of today's meeting, I did want to, some of our comments seemed a little bit misinformed, and so I just wanted to clarify a few details. In particular, I wanted to clarify that this board is not making a decision to reopen schools. This is not a decision that is before this board or within this board's control at this time. This board is also not directly meeting with the governor. That was something that I saw in some correspondences. Pending the outcome of this meeting, it is possible that this resolution could be forwarded onto the governor's office. In addition, there was concern that this is an action based on political pressure rather than science. And while each board member can and will speak for themselves, I do want to state that none of us are epidemiologists or healthcare professionals, including our superintendent. We will not advocate for or suggest alternative health metrics to the state of Oregon or the Oregon Health Authority. We do have to trust that OHA has a skilled team of health professionals who are considering disease data, tracking, and monitoring our case rates, comparing our rates to those of other states and country, and consulting with area doctors and doctors nationwide and the CDC to provide us with research and well-vetted information on how to navigate through this health crisis. That being said, there was mention of that October 15th date, and what's happening is the governor's office, ODE, and OHA will begin actively working on an update to the health metrics this week. They are doing that. They have a process in place for that that is taking place regardless of how the Linn-Wilsonville School Board conducts itself today. There is a process that establishes at that state level any changes to the metrics. That process will occur over the next couple of weeks. And I received information, or our district has, that we could anticipate updated metrics being released sometime at the end of the month. So the resolution before the board today is intended, I believe, to support that process of reevaluating metrics. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dylan Hides and Christy Thompson so that they can introduce their reason and rationale for this resolution. So Dylan and Christy.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Molitor. So as I envision it, I'm going to speak to the resolution. I think Director Thompson will. I'll go ahead and make a motion that the board adopt the resolution, and at that point we can discuss it and discuss any changes that anybody would like to make to it, if any. So based on the overwhelming level of community input in a very short amount of time, for and against on the issue of returning to school, I think it's valuable that the board takes up this issue, and I want to thank my fellow board members for taking time on a Wednesday morning to do that. And I also want to acknowledge this significant difficulty the governor faces in having to make this choice of how to set the metrics, because this is a really complex issue with really good reasons on both sides to keep schools closed versus reopening them for kids. And it's literally a life or death issue. So the stakes couldn't be any higher. And as we've seen from the public comment today and for the last several weeks, the intensity of these feelings is 10 out of 10 on both sides. So I want to personally acknowledge and thank Governor Brown for agreeing to reassess her return to school metrics. And I want to thank our representatives, particularly Courtney Neuron, who I know has done a fantastic job of talking about this issue, talking with constituents and learning more about the issue, and making sure that the state's return to school metrics reflect the best science, and making sure that that message is passed on to the governor. And I would submit that most of us, if not all of us, probably agree that it makes sense to reevaluate metrics as we learn more about this disease every day. You know, we continually learn more about how COVID works, what conditions we can safely operate in, and what conditions we can't safely operate in. The reason why, I'll speak for myself, Director Thompson can speak for herself, but the reason why I spearheaded with her the effort to draft this resolution is that it's clear to me that Governor Brown has very clearly considered the costs of opening schools, the risk of that. It's less clear to me that Governor Brown and her team have carefully considered the costs of not opening schools. We know this affects all families a lot. Some families appreciate the brunt of this more. If you're a lower income family, you can't afford a tutor. If you're a single parent family or a family with both parents that work, having somebody there to help the kids with school is a major challenge. Anecdotally, we're hearing from hundreds of families in the district who are struggling with this. Feelings of isolation students are feeling, depression, losing interest in education. And from personal experience, I have 3 kids in the district. One of my children last week, who very well-behaved student, no history of behavioral issues, threw their school laptop against the wall and it literally broke. It wouldn't turn back on. And we had to get a new computer from the school. And I'm waiting to hear back from the principal if we can pay for that to be repaired or replaced. So the costs are real here. We just want to make sure, or I want to make sure, that the governor is considering the pros and cons on both sides of the issue. And I want to say that my acknowledgement that there are problems with comprehensive distance learning is not a knock on the district. In 6 months, we've essentially asked our teachers and staff to completely reinvent how education works. And the fact that it's working as well as it is nothing short of amazing. And I want to really give credit to Dr. Ludwig and her team and every single teacher for making this work. As a former teacher myself, I couldn't imagine having to teach this way, and I'm glad that I don't have to teach this way. And then I'm seeing the teachers firsthand with my own kids, using that extra time that they have each day to meet with them after school to give them individual help. So the district's doing a great job in a very difficult situation. Back to the resolution, I want to be clear about what the resolution before the board today would do. It's not an attempt to pressure the governor to reopen schools. It's not an attempt to keep them closed. It's an acknowledgement that we are learning about this disease more every day. We are seeing other districts do this, which every time a district opens up their school, it's an opportunity for us to learn more about what works and what doesn't work. And so it's a request that the governor listen to science. I've read the public comments. There's over 25,000 words of public comment here. And a lot of it misunderstands what the resolution is. So I would really encourage every person who has feelings about this to begin with reading the resolution. One commenter wrote, quote, "I am shocked and disappointed to learn that you would be considering pressuring our Governor Kate Brown to reopen schools," close quote. To be clear, this resolution does not do that. In fact, it states the opposite. It says, "Dear Governor Brown, please do not give in to political pressure. Listen to the science on this issue." And I would assume that everybody, whether you are for or against opening schools, that everybody supports listening to the best science rather than giving in to political pressure. Finally, there's been talk today about this resolution being rushed. It is rushed. Absolutely, it's rushed. And that's because tomorrow the governor starts the process of re-examining this. And we want this resolution in front of her because we want it to be impactful, not just us handing out amongst ourselves, but to be impactful. And the way it can do that is to be on her desk in front of her team when she starts that process tomorrow. And that's why the time frame is what it is. So, all right, Dr. Thompson.
Thank you. And again, I just want to reiterate many of the things Dylan said. I'm going to try not to repeat. He covered a lot of the same sentiments that I have. But just start with a tremendous job that our district has done with CDL and the things that are happening with kids and our teachers. And so I just want to say a huge thank you to all of the work. I've heard that our teachers are working twice as much. Know that we hear that, we appreciate that. And it's in consideration of what I feel like our district, that our district the reason that I feel like Director Hydes and myself felt like we could come forward with this type of resolution is because as a district, we've demonstrated our concern for the safety of our students, families, and staff by creating an online option. And so that online option that we gave to every student to give them that option to take so that they wouldn't have to come back to schools. In addition to that full year online option, we've also told our families who signed up for CDL hybrid learning that if at some point our county does meet the governor's metrics and we consider reopening, that they can still make the choice to remain online in CDL if they don't feel comfortable coming back to the classroom at that time. So not only do we have our online program, we have our CDL hybrid program, and we are still giving kids the option if we do go back to in-person school to continue with that comprehensive distance learning. Additionally, after the transfer process, when some of our teachers moved to the full year online program, the board was informed by Shyla Waldern, our Director of Human Resources, that all staff who had known medical conditions or immediate family members with medical conditions at the time of the transfer process were transfer accepted into the year-long online program. So that information was shared with the board to let us know that the teachers that had expressed those kind of concerns were able to be accommodated into our online programs. And I'm just going to reiterate a few things. I apologize for going over maybe a few things that Director Hydes did, but just based on some of the comments that we saw, I want to make sure people again know what the resolution is for and what it's not for. So, you know, I feel like this is a balanced resolution that was put forward, which does the following. It thanks Governor Brown for agreeing to reevaluate the metrics. She was already planning to reevaluate those metrics. We are thanking her for doing that to determine if students can return to in-person safely. Again, we're not asking her to lower them. We're just thanking her for agreeing to reevaluate. We're also encouraging her to regularly reassess the metrics as knowledge of COVID changes. We're encouraging her to look at the successes and the failures of other districts in the US and other countries who've returned. So we want to see where has it worked and where hasn't, and what can we as Oregon learn from that. We are also encouraging, and it says right there, to continue to base the metrics on the best available science. We don't want to go rogue on this. We're not asking you to, we want to continue to look at the science and have that guide our metrics. And again, to weigh the pros and the cons of opening schools either too soon or too late. So in the crafting of this resolution, we really did try to make sure that we were erring on both sides of safety, but yet also that encouragement and continue to have that growth mindset of, okay, but where are things changing? Where are there successes? What can we look for?
Just for point of order, do we have a motion and a second yet?
I was just gonna say, let's make a motion in a second and then we can discuss
All
this
right.
as a, thanks, Ginger.
We'll go ahead and move that the board adopt the resolution regarding Governor Brown's reevaluation of return to school metrics.
And I'll second it.
All right, it's been moved by Dylan Hyde, seconded by Christy Thompson, and I will open it up for discussion. If you could use your raise hand feature, I will use that. Hold on one second. Okay, Ginger, I see you there. Thank you.
So I don't support this resolution, and I have problems with enough of the language that it would basically gut it in terms of if we're going to modify the resolution. I think it's a political statement where we say we don't want the governor to be political. And I think that's noted both by the rush to get this done and the failure to take the time to get input from district staff, from our unions, and from the community, and to have a fully vetted conversation about this. I think that the cites to the CDC that are in the whereas statements are from months ago. And what we know is that the CDC has recently acknowledge the science that this is transmitted differently than we believe. We have all sorts of data since June and July where the CDC studies in here are referenced in the whereas are referring to things that happened earlier in the year, studies earlier in the year. We have a lot more information both locally and nationally about what's happened when schools have reopened. That's all information that our public health director and the governor and the Department of Education would have when they're reconsidering the metrics. I think what we know, and I'll just read some of the things that were said by in the public comments that were things that mirrored my own concerns. Academics can be recovered, but loss of life can't. This is studies have shown that the effects of COVID disproportionately affect people of color and low socioeconomic individuals. Our staff has gone to great lengths to mitigate that additional impact of distance learning on students of color, students with disabilities, and lower income students. In fact, the impact in these families would be worse if we return to in-person learning prematurely, thus opening the possibility of further spreading the virus to this population. In fact, the hybrid model means that students have less synchronized instructional time than they do in the CDL model. We should minimize the risks while serving students of need, disability, or economic reasons or safety. Again, there was in one of the comments, an article, the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 on racial and ethnic minorities. The statements that are in the whereas don't acknowledge both sides as presented. It doesn't provide a balanced view for the governor to consider. It is only asking the governor to consider one perspective. So we're not balanced in the language in the whereas statements or the resolutions. So that's concerning to me. I would also note that what we know is the University of Oregon and our local systems, the statements in the resolved is please consider their successes. Well, let's look at their failures too. And personally, I have a different perspective on the issue of liability, which is one of the resolves too. I acknowledge with the families and the staff and the board that this is not an ideal situation to be learning, but we're in a pandemic, a national and an international pandemic. That's not within our control. What is within our control is what we're doing. And I spoke with someone who, and you can see it on the Department of Human Services website, about concerns about the abuse reporting and the numbers in September as reported to the governor of child abuse reports, as well as the percentage of those investigated is a little less than last year this time, but it is comparable. So we're not missing out on students who are suffering at home and are unrecognized. Those are being caught. I also have spoken with families who are in various kinds of status, socioeconomic status, their kids at various levels, and there is not a pressing urge to return to school before the metrics that the governor has imposed have been met. And particularly that there was a comment and comments about certainty, and maybe I missed that, but it's this constant roller coaster that the reevaluation is a problem with. That some certainty, these are the metrics, this is what the numbers we're looking at. There's no reason to believe that the metrics are erroneous. I'm not, in fact, wanting to encourage that we change the only certainty we have right now, which is these numbers. So I'm in opposition to both taking a vote under these circumstances, making a political statement, and to the language, both in the whereas and the resolved.
Dylan? Oh, you're on mute.
Thank you, Director Fitch, for that thoughtful feedback. Did want to address some of the things that you mentioned. You mentioned that we haven't had a lot of time for public comment on this, but what I would say is that I can't speak for you, but I know I've been hearing about this literally every day for 2 months. Heard from probably not thousands, but definitely hundreds of individuals, parents, students, teachers who have talked about this. So I feel like I do have a large base of constituent information to base any decision on. You mentioned that we should just continue what we're doing. I just feel differently. I feel like as a board, we were elected to lead. And so far, the board's been probably, I think, in my opinion, too passive on this issue. That we need to have some advocacy, take some position on this. And the position we're taking today isn't that schools should reopen. In fact, we're not even advocating that the governor change her metrics, right? What we're advocating for is that she update this evaluation periodically to make sure it reflects the best science. And you correctly pointed out that the whereases are not balanced. And that's true. And the reason why it's not balanced is that we know the governor is very concerned about the risks of reopening schools. I don't know that the governor is concerned about the costs of not opening schools. And so I want to make sure she looks at both sides of the issue and not just one side of the issue. And if she concludes, when her team is done, they say, look, we've looked at the districts around the world and the country, we think our metrics are spot on and shouldn't be changed, I will respect that evaluation. I am not a scientist. I am not a health expert. I'm going to defer to the Oregon Health Authority for what they determine is best. But I do think it's at least our job to make sure that we advocate that both sides be considered, since we have such strong opinions on both sides in this community. Let's see. Yeah, and so I don't want this to devolve into a discussion of whether or not schools should reopen or reclose. That's not what we're deciding today. I don't have a position on that. I have a position that that decision be based on science, and I don't think I need to talk to district staff to make sure that we base a decision on science rather than political pressure, which is the fundamental essence of what this motion is.
And I'm just, if I could add just one other facet, and then Chelsea, I can call on you, but I also, you know, our code of conduct policy BBF also advises the board that it should only take action after receiving the input and guidance of the superintendent. And so at some point in this discussion, you know, Dr. Ludwig, I would like to hear your input and thoughts on this matter. So be thinking of that maybe, and then I'll call on Chelsea and then we can come back to you, Dr. Ludwig. Chelsea?
This is a tough one for me. I read all the comments. You know, I saw inaccuracies on both sides that did lead me to wonder if people had read the resolution. And I also saw, you know, that this is an example of the personal being political, and so it is both for people. You know, it's affecting their direct life just as much as it's a political statement. So we're really kind of straddling both. I see the resolution when I just look at it, you know, standing alone, as really not necessarily doing much to what the governor is already doing. She's stating she's going to look at her metrics, and this resolution is basically saying, like, please look at your metrics. This resolution is saying, weigh the pros and cons of opening schools too soon or too late. So there are, you know, there's a statement here about, you know, base your decisions on available science. Rather than political pressure. And so I see the resolution also kind of straddling the line between, you know, look at science and consider, you know, too soon, too late, consider safety, you know, consider looking at other models that have opened before us. So in some ways, I assume the governor's office is doing that. And I do appreciate that angle of saying that we do want you to consider the risks of staying closed, but, you know, in absence of considering science. And so I have heard from a lot of parents. We've been receiving those emails for months about the toll this is taking on their family and on their students. I'm like Director Hydes articulated it. I'm living it as well with 3 kids. In fact, I'm not in my office. I've been kicked out of there. So I'm sharing my house with 3 kiddos who are also doing distance learning. And so, you know, I honestly, like, I hear you, Director Fitch, and I agree with much of what you say. And I hear you, Director Hydes and Director Thompson. I hear, you know, I agree with much of what you say. So this is a tough one for me. I do have just a couple of questions though. With the, you know, I'm very sensitive to the idea of race and socioeconomics and, you know, cognitive and academic abilities. And so this statement in the third whereas, but particularly to students of color, students with disabilities and lower income students, I'm wondering, do you have a source for that? Or is that just sort of a anecdotal or intuitive knowing?
Dylan or Christy, if you could share.
Director Thompson, I think that you actually looked into this last night. Is that right? Can you speak to that, Director Thompson?
Christy, you're on mute.
I'm trying to pull up my email, and my computers aren't cooperating today for some reason.
So it does come from the CDC website on schools and communities, and particularly a tab that says something like encouraging reopening or something like that. But then what I was referring to is it has footnotes for the data, but it's all from earlier than I believe June or earlier. It could be July, but none of it is July for sure. And the data is also kind of about speculation about that harm, particularly it's urban studies. And it is just general knowledge that during, for instance, summer, that certain student cohorts are impacted by a delay in learning, as opposed to what happens when the entire student body is doing delayed learning or distant learning. And it also includes studies where schools were not doing any kind of comprehensive distance learning, particularly not at the level that our staff and our superintendent has provided with regular contact by the teachers. So there's definitely, in my opinion, deficits in the studies upon which the CDC's relies.
Yeah, that statement did come from the CDC. And I would say, just as you read through their documents, specifically under their under the tab importance of reopening schools, it's actually mentioned 2 or 3 times under different topics that they address.
So I think my concern then is that just with that statement, I don't see a source cited, and it is stated as fact, and I certainly, you know, that's an issue that's important to me. And so I want to ensure that if I'm going to vote yes on this resolution, that there's some source cited there. And typically I know as well with web sources, such as what I assume you're pulling the CDC information from their website, typically a date is included. And so I would be curious to know the date of those. And so I do have some concerns about the citations and the amount of information that's provided or not provided with the citations.
I didn't want to say that I'm just Googling it now, and a lot of stuff's coming up on the unequal effect this has on different communities, including lower socioeconomic communities. I think even if you wanted to present competing studies, I think we can probably all conclude that the less money you make, the harder this is going to hit you, right? The less resources you have to get you through this. My kids have a tutor 2 days a week. I know a lot of families don't get to hire tutors and don't have that option. My kids also have 2 parents who can help them out. A lot of families don't have 2 parents. And I know that it is a demographical fact in this country that families of color tend to be lower socioeconomically. And so I don't know if we need a Harvard study to tell us that people of color have a lower socioeconomic status, and people with lower socioeconomic status have difficulty, more difficulty than somebody with more affluent means to get through this crisis. So, but if that language is what it's going to take to get us a third vote, we can make a motion and strike that language. I would like to keep it in there, but if that's a deal breaker for a third vote, then I guess we lose it.
All right, well, everyone ponders that. Ginger?
Part of my concern is I really don't think that I want an upper middle class family telling me about the concerns and the difficulties that families within our district are having who might be on the lower end of the socioeconomic status, nor those who are people of color. I would much rather be hearing that from those people. And what I find in the comments that I'm receiving from individuals is really, I'm speaking for a different group of people who must be struggling, who I'm sure are struggling during this time. That is not what I'm hearing from those other families. And that's one of the reasons I really oppose that kind of statement. I oppose that we somehow know the experiences of people of color, or people who have children with disabilities, or people who are having socioeconomic problems during the pandemic. In fact, our district has done quite a lot to make sure that families who are disadvantaged have the supports they need. And I just think it's presumptuous that we could speak for another group without having heard from them.
Right, and I will just comment, I've just had a general wondering amongst us, and maybe this would be a good topic for our January board work session, is around like, what assumptions do we make about groups of people, and however well-intentioned we are, how do we actually get that knowledge rather than just assuming? But I'm just putting that out there because I think this discussion kind of illuminates wonderings I've been having since June. All right, Chelsea, and then Dr. Ludwig, I'll end up returning to you.
Yeah, again, I don't know which way I'll vote. I appreciate some things about this resolution. For example, the fact that it points out the Ready Schools, Safe Learners plan, and the fact that it's calling on the governor to consider science. I do have a concern with the sheer number of emails we had against that were primarily from our staff. And so as a major stakeholder, that gives me pause, that they're not collaborating necessarily on writing this. I know we're here to represent the public. Chair Molitor, I know that as the chair, you typically facilitate these discussions and reserve, you typically hold back your opinion until the discussion has unfolded, as doing your due diligence as chair. And I appreciate that we've asked the superintendent to weigh in. I respect the fact that she and her staff have worked really hard to make education possible during a pandemic. But Chair Molitor, are you willing to share some of your thoughts prior to hearing from the superintendent? Sure.
Actually, Chelsea, you articulated my thoughts like almost to a T, I'll be honest. When you were weighing it, I came in today not with any formed opinion, but needing to hear my fellow board members' thoughts and impressions. And I think, for me, when I received notice of this particular resolution, I will say that, I didn't know what its content was. And a lot of that's because you have two board members who work together with that. And if you include a third in that discussion, it becomes a public meeting. And so we are very cognizant to not do that. But it did concern me that potentially this would be much more of a political move, or maybe not a sound science-based move, or something that would have disrupted our memorandums of understanding that we had already reached with our associations. So, but then when I actually received and was able to review the resolution, I did feel a whole lot better about it. But I think you articulated it kind of reiterates and asks for what I perceive as actions which are already occurring. And it points to asking the governor, ODE, OHA, to also weigh in addition to just the science and the health concerns, to equally weigh the impact on students and families of not being in learning in person, all of which is already happening. And so kind of as this decision has unfolded, I guess I would probably lean to the side of not necessarily supporting this motion, because I feel that the ramifications and disruption could do greater harm than we have in making this ask for things that I actually already believe are taking place. So that is likely where I stand at the moment. But I'd also like to hear our superintendent's thoughts and impressions. Dr. Ludwig?
I was hoping I could be asked at the very end so that board members can continue to work through what they need to as they make sense of the resolution. So I'm fine waiting until you believe all board members have expressed their thoughts with one another. And then we'll share my thoughts at the very end.
All right, Dylan.
Thank you. Just wanted to address one point that Vice Chair King said, and then one thing that Chair Molitor said. Vice Chair King, you're absolutely right that there were a lot of comments against this resolution, mostly from staff. But when I read those, I don't recall seeing a single teacher who was against what this resolution actually does, which is to ask the governor to base her decision on science and consider all sides of the issue. What the teachers were uniformly against was a resolution that pressured the governor to reopen schools. And this resolution actually says, do not give in to pressure, rely on science. So I definitely take that into consideration when I weigh the fact that there's 67 comments against it, but none of which that I saw actually directed what the resolution does. And that's an important point for me. And secondly, Chair Molitor says the motion is asking for things that are already taking place. We don't know about that. I mean, the reason I drafted this is because it was drafted precisely because I'm not sure that is happening. We know the governor is carefully listening to people who say keep schools closed. I have no indication of the extent she's going through to understand the other side of this issue, which is the pros and cons of opening schools up. And so this is just saying, hey, if this isn't happening already, please do it. And if it is happening, like share that with us. Let us know what's happening. Be a little more transparent in this process. So that's it. Thanks.
Ginger.
So if in fact that is what Director Hydes wanted to say, this resolution goes way beyond that. And we, just as we don't know what he's assuming things that the governor is listening to and not listening to, and I'm not willing to make that assumption. And so for me, this is really understood properly by those who are opposing it to make a political statement encouraging her to change the metrics.
All right. Does anybody have anything new they want to add to this discussion? I will say and commend all of you, each of you, for being thoughtful, thought-provoking, and very collegial during this process, which I have a tremendous amount of gratitude for each of you. Christy.
Thank you, Director Fitch, for I wanted to call you a doctor, Director Fitch, for your comments. And And I hear what you're saying, but really the intention behind it was not politically, I can say for myself, it wasn't politically driven. And it, again, doesn't ask the governor to change the metrics, just continue to reevaluate and continue to base it on science. So.
Dr. Ludwig, it looks like we are now circled to you.
Well, I, again, just want to echo the sentiments around the collegiality of this group. I think any other superintendent might be incredibly nervous about a board discussion with this topic, but I have incredible faith in each of you and your respect for each other, and expected nothing different than how this is going in terms of thoughtful, hard conversation that stayed with great integrity and respect for each other. So thank you for being such a high functioning board in terms of your thoughtfulness, but staying with such integrity and respect for each other. So for those who are listening in and who might be watching this recording, this is a remarkable board. And what you have are 5 individuals who have committed to working together as a team and as a group. This is not the case in many school districts. So wherever this discussion leads to, please know that you have 5 individuals, a collective, that are a gift to this community, and they're a gift to this superintendent during this remarkably difficult time. And I'm honored to lead with them. Just a few thoughts on my end is that, however this resolution was drafted, I think what emerged is just the complexity of it. And I believe that's what Director Hides began with. And however crafted by very skilled wordsmiths on our board, it still led to misunderstanding, I think still too in the community around what the intention of it was. There were comments around, thank you for reopening the schools, and persuading the governor, which wasn't the intention, to please don't open the schools and stay with it, which wasn't the intention. And I think what surfaced is how complex this is and how emotional it still is for so many families, that even a well-crafted document is very widely still misunderstood by families who are struggling either way with reconciling it. So that would just be my comments around the reading of the resolution and how already the community is not maybe quite understanding its intent. This pandemic only surfaced disparities that already existed. And you as a board committed several years ago around disrupting systems of racism, and I would add systems of oppression. And we've been working for several years in that vein, into that commitment. And often crises and things like a pandemic just amplify, sometimes wildfires, the disparities that are in our systems. And wherever we go with this, when we get to the other side, we need to hold on to what we're experiencing today and remember that we have to stay committed to challenging those disparities. Even when things return to normal, they're not normal for everybody, and they haven't been for everybody, and to commit to that board goal. In terms of this resolution and any action, I appreciate the reminder that there's nothing in this resolution that is changing our operational blueprint. There's nothing in this resolution that's changing the work that we've done with our associations, with our MOUs, our contract language. And so I want the community again to hear that. This is not a resolution that staff brought forward to the board. So in fairness, just transparency, we have not been working on creating this. It's not a resolution that we were seeking. At the same time, here it is. Any weigh-in for, or, approval or not is not going to change our operational blueprint. It won't change what we're doing today, tomorrow. What will change that is direction from the governor, OHA, and ODE to all 197 public school districts, and guidance to private schools. That's the authority by which this board and myself are looking to, and again, guided by health officials. So in that vein, this is not a resolution that's prompting any action. So because of that, I do not feel that I'm going to recuse any recommendation. It's not work that we have done or brought forward, so I have nothing to recommend about it. But I stay committed to a very well-crafted operational blueprint, and the staff work on that, and the board critique of that was incredibly thorough. And our county public health department that has reviewed every item in our operational blueprint for safety protocols. And those are the documents that I do stand by and did recommend to the board and were approved. So in that regard, I'm going to recuse any opinion on this resolution. Recuse myself from any opinion on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ludwig. All right. So at this point, does anybody want to make a kind of a closing comments discussion?
I just really quickly want to say, if we're not unanimous, this is a kind of thing we're resolving a statement that would go to the governor. And I think it's ill-informed to do so when there is not consensus on the language and the intent.
Chelsea?
I think I remain very committed to our district goal, #1 of disrupting systems of racism. And I'm still learning and growing. And even though I've been looking at this stuff for, 20 years or more, on how to lean into communicating in a way that doesn't replicate systems of oppression. And so I have some concerns about some of the statements in the whereas, the third whereas, as I pointed out already, but also even just some of the quotes around children who live in unsafe homes and unsafe neighborhoods, and some of the implicit bias that may be inherent in our culture around some of that language. And, just I haven't looked into those CDC quotations. So that second, the but particular to students of color, and that third whereas, as well as the subsequent 3 whereas that cites the CDC, as well as the comment about what our communities are requesting. I have reservations about those statements in this resolution. That's where my primary reservations lie, because the rest of it, as I said, is basically saying, weigh the pros and cons of opening schools, look at science, consider that we have a safe plan. And again, I think I could support that. I think it's asking the governor to do what I assume that she is doing, which is looking at science and evaluating metrics. And so I do have some reservations about sending it with a split vote, particularly with the amount of disruption that did occur in our community, and the lack of clarity that people seem to have. I don't know if they didn't read the resolution or if they read it and they interpreted it a certain way, but there's that reaction that gives me pause as well. So again, those are my concerns. I don't need to keep repeating myself, but I felt like I should be clear about where my reservations are.
All right, barring no other input, speak now. All right. Kelly, would you please call this for a vote?
Ginger Fitch.
No.
Megan Molitor.
No.
Christy Thompson,
Yes.
Dylan Hides,
Aye.
Chelsea King,
No.
All right, thank you, board. I feel a little bit that this discussion definitely resembles the ongoing debate and back and forth in our community, as well as what we saw in public comments. What's happening in our community is happening here amongst us as a board. But at the same time, it's very clear there's no easy, simple solution, but it's clear that all 5 of us, along with our superintendent and administration, are committed to staying engaged in this issue and supporting, I think, reevaluation of metrics as new information becomes available. And I think that this discussion highlights that we're all joined in that, even if we can't entirely agree on the wording around that. So I just want to say thank you. And then there was just one other issue that came up that I thought possibly we'd want to just note. It was about, split vote and how that works. Not to say that we couldn't have discussion, but policy BBF does state that decisions are made as a result of a majority vote. And so that once a vote is taken, and this was an action in which there was a vote, it should be supported by all board members. So regardless of how, had we been 3-2 in either direction, we all collectively now support this outcome. So Dylan, did you have something to add?
I did want to say that, so even though the board isn't going to be taking a position on the governor's current actions, I just want to remind those in the community that while some may assume the governor is doing what they want her to do, as far as weighing all options, relying on science, I wouldn't make that assumption. So I would encourage anyone in the community who wishes the board to take an action today to feel free to do so on their own.
And absolutely, in that same vein, Dylan, Christy, you can still send a letter directly to the governor or put it before them jointly or independently, as well as, any of the rest of us. If we have things that we would like to highlight, we're able to do that. Dr. Ledwig.
I would just also like to remind our community, and again, appreciate the leadership of the board, that there are places where reopening thoughtfully, slowly, or bringing some students on campus with the parameters that have been given is occurring. There are school districts who are open for K-3 exception. Our county isn't there yet. We're preparing for when that could happen. There is limited in-person instruction occurring. I want to remind our community that almost every district in the state is moving in that direction of having some students on campus for a variety of reasons that is available for districts to make that decision, so that we can attend to some of the issues that were raised by our board members around students who might be struggling, whether it's mental health, connectivity to internet, maybe working with an element of an IEP or an evaluation. That provision is in place with limited in-person instruction. And so I want to assure our community that our district is moving in that direction, and we are opening for limited in-person instruction, and that we are also opening for co-curricular activities. We do have our high school students right now optionally for them, as well as optionally for coaches, under all of the guidelines set forth by the Governor Brown administration, by OHA, and by OSAA, which I've communicated to our community very carefully and thoughtfully. And that is part of the evaluation that I do hear from Colt Gill at ODE that will be occurring this month, is taking a look at where districts have been opening and what has that opening yielded in terms of successes or challenges with the guidance that's been in place, and where districts are opening for LII, limited in-person instruction, or co-curricular. So there are, unlike in June and July, when no children were on campus, we do now have students on campus. And what I'm hearing from ODE, and I just want to make sure the public who's listening, is that those reopenings will be part of what is now information in that reevaluation, which we didn't have in the summer. And so my understanding is that districts who have been doing what we've been doing, or even been able to go beyond that, will be part of the examination, or the part of the review, so to speak. In addition to looking at other states and trends and national. That's information that I've been receiving. So I just wanted to assure our families that there are provisions where we have been having students on campus safely. And we're working really with integrity and thoughtfully and carefully through that.
All right, Christy, I noticed, yeah, you can have our last closing remark.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank, first of all, the district staff for their efforts to pull together this meeting. I want to thank my fellow board members just for all the work that you did behind our meeting today. I do truly respect each one of you. And I do feel, as to Dr. Ludwig's point, what I appreciate about our board is the diverse opinion that we each bring. And I want you to know that I value all of your opinions and I learn from those things. So at the end of the day, whether we agree or disagree, I want you to know that you have my respect. And I appreciate all of the work that you each put into this meeting and to look at the resolution that Director Hides and I brought. And then I just want to thank our community members for being involved and for all of your comments. You know, just for caring about this community. That's why each one of us are here sitting on this board, is because we care. And just to say that, you know, and I say this all the time, but our greatest asset in this district are our people, our district staff who, you know, will call a special meeting and, you know, Curtis Nelson, who will do all the things behind the scenes to make sure a meeting can happen. I don't want those things to go unnoticed. And that, you know, we've got staff that care, that have opinions, that care about the kids that they teach, and that are willing to take personal time, and community members to take personal time out of their day to share your opinions. Thank you for sharing those opinions. Continue to share your opinions with us, please. You know, I read those words, we all read those words and we take them to heart. So anyway, that's just how I just want to end this meeting on that note of something that I feel like we're not seeing enough in our community these days. And that's just that, that coming together and still in disagreement, and finding that common bond that we all share of caring for our kids and our community.
Excellent. Thank you. It's a wonderful closing note, and I will call this special meeting to a close. Thank you all.